Welcome back to Innovate Africa. I'm Kino, as you know. If you don't know, and it's the first time you're seeing this mug, don't worry. It's great having you on the show. So what we pride ourselves in is that we speak to the most innovative people behind the most innovative businesses, but most importantly, people and businesses who impact lives on the African continent. And when we speak about inclusivity, we think about a whole lot of things, right? Including payment inclusivity, etc., etc. How often have you had a conversation around insurance inclusivity? I don't know about you. I haven't had one in a very long time, but we are going to have one today. Jeremy Leach is the founder. I was going to call him co-founder. He's actually the founder and also the executive director of Inclusivity Solutions. Great having you on the show.
Great, and thank you for having me,
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, the name should give it away, right? But we don't sit here with mirror balls assuming we know what's going on. So tell me about Inclusivity Solutions, what you do, and essentially why you get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, good question. So Inclusivity Solutions, I think as its name represents, is really about expanding access to insurance in emerging markets. And the reason why we did that is because insurance is the one that was the furthest from the tipping point, and yet, when done well, has considerable impact. But if you look at kind of north of South Africa, only 3 to 5% of the adult population tend to have insurance. But those are the populations where insurance is most needed and most required. And so when I was at a think tank, Finmark Trust, overseeing payments, credit, savings, and insurance, I saw insurance was the one that had the biggest challenge and the biggest need. Maybe I should have gone to payments because payments gets a lot of money.
They do.
But insurance is the one that has that impact if you get it right. And that's essentially what we're all about, is around trying to get access to insurance to the people who need it the most.
Now, I want to talk about your tipping point, though. It's not like you were born and you fell into finding solutions around insurance. I mean, you were a money man for a long time. And you worked in Jersey, of course, the island of Jersey, or at least Old
Yeah,
Jersey.
Old Jersey, not New Jersey.
Not New Jersey, absolutely, right. Worked with high net worth individuals. I mean, the pivot from there to, doing a master's in what? Development, international development. What sparked that, your tipping point?
You really want a long story here, huh?
Go for it. We got 20 minutes. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, my first career was as an accountant in offshore financial services. And then I had what I call a quarter-life crisis. I decided while it was intellectually stimulating, it wasn't really having much impact. So I went traveling around the world for a couple of years, became a professional bum, um, doing stuff from cutting vines to fixing bicycles at different kind of places. And I ended up meeting some amazing people in that development space. So it inspired me to go back to school, went back and did a master's in international development, expecting to be working 5 days a week, and then mountain biking and cycling, ended up working 7 days a week, which was quite a surprise. And then from there, went to DFID, which is the UK government's Department for International Development, focusing around saying, how do you stimulate growth in the private sector in developing countries, emerging markets? And that basically inspired the shift onto kind of financial inclusion and onto insurance.
So when it comes to inclusion and insurance, a lot of people still don't understand that, don't understand the value. A lot of people would look at this and go, insurance is a grudge purchase. I don't really want to pay for it, but if something happens to my car, then I'm going to have to, right? But I want to talk about the value of insurance, the intrinsic value and the intrinsic value of including people
Yeah.
in this insurance net. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, good question. But I mean, all this goes back to the creation of the modern insurance sector. So if you think of the fire of London, where the massive fires kind of wiped out so many people, well, the high net worth individuals didn't really matter because they had houses in the country. So they essentially were managing that risk. It was the middle income and low income who were completely wiped out because you lose your shelter, your assets, your business inventory if you're running business from home. So they're the ones who really needed insurance, and that's really what insurance was about. It's those people who were exposed to risk and had no other mechanisms to manage that risk, and that's where insurance was born. We probably moved away from that, and in South Africa, the focus on the upper end market. It's actually that lower mass market who, when there's a risk event, whether it's a life or health or weather risk, they lose everything. And that's what insurance was designed to solve. And that's basically what we're trying to do it across kind of Africa. Certainly in South Africa, yes, that focus around insurance is sold, not bought. I mean, that's a common refrain. There are exceptions to that. I mean, look at funeral insurance in South Africa. I mean, that's massive because it's culturally driven.
Yes.
Not many markets have that same driver, but insurance penetration in South Africa in terms of number of people, it's
Right.
actually one of the highest in emerging markets. But primarily that's skewed towards funeral insurance because the majority of the population, that low mass market, takes funeral insurance. It's the other products which haven't had that take up, where we also need to innovate around the risk that really kind of impact people, affordable housing and other areas.
That is absolutely fascinating. Now, I would imagine, and I'm not going to presuppose that, you woke up one day with a will and someone left you, half a trillion euros or quid, and you could start a business like this and run it because trying to get solutions, inclusivity solutions in insurance to a consumer base is very expensive. So, how does someone after cutting vines, doing the development finance thing, then going, hey man, we need to find solutions around it. How do you deploy that? Because you can't be a B2C solution. That would be hellishly expensive.
Yeah, good question. So we're B2B to C.
Ah,
So we work with distribution partners, kind of, and insurers to leverage those trusted brands to provide insurance
right.
to the mass market. So that's kind of where the key is. I mean, certainly we've seen experience those direct to consumer plays. I mean, the old days used to say it cost $1 million to create a brand. Now it's pretty much $1 million a month. You just see the amount of spending you see in the market around those direct to consumer plays. So that's obviously pretty expensive. So we work for those trusted partners, the big brands. We're working with kind of MTN in Rwanda. We're working with Axis Bank in Botswana, Safaricom, the biggest telco in kind of Kenya, and leveraging their brands and their massive kind of databases in order to be able to deliver the right insurance to the right people at the right time.
So they give you the channel to deliver, and they give you the resources to be able to, well, do the payments, do whatever you need to do, but you bring the innovation. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We innovate in terms of product and kind of process and really around that customer experience. So we're an insurtech platform that provides the end-to-end capabilities to support you to, sign up via your
Yeah.
cell phone,
Yeah.
whether SMS, USSD, WhatsApp, Mobi sites, the partners app, it doesn't really matter. On that side, right through to kind of claims processing. The platform for techies, there's no code, kind of open APIs and
Yeah.
all those kind of good stuff with AI kind of built into that. So it makes it flexible and easy
Yeah.
to use and certainly aims to delight the end kind of customer. And whilst our focus very much was in north of South Africa, was around that mass market, the reality is you have to be multi-segment in order to make that kind of viable. So we can do a lot more than just that low end space. We do products that meet the needs of the different segments across the markets.
This sounds like something that you've built to scale initially. So a lot of people think with the end in mind, and I would imagine you think scale. How do we get there? Mass market is about scale. If you're going to make money out of it, at the end of the day, you're going to need scale. But how much testing, local testing, working with smaller businesses? I mean, we always advise people before you do the big thing, right? Before you go and scale a business, maybe you've got to learn some lessons first. So, how much schoolwork did you go through before actually, hitting the scale pedal and working with the bigger companies?
Yeah, and very good questions. I mean, it somewhat relates to my history and also inclusivity. So I went from a think tank
Yep.
looking at the broader financial services space where we did a lot of work around trying understanding the Finscope deployed the
Yeah.
Finscope survey in South Africa and a number of other countries of financial diaries, really understand the needs of the customers. I then went to Hollard, where I innovated around product and distribution
Yeah.
from Pakistan to Ghana to South Africa,
Right.
and then consulting, advising players in that area before Inclusivity Solutions. When our first iteration, we did a lot around that design, build, operate model, which included doing kind of heavy kind of client understanding, doing kind of financial diaries, doing kind of focus groups and a human-centered design kind of research to understand the needs of the customers, which allowed us to experiment across a number of products and channels across
Wow.
markets. And from that, we then pulled together basically a whole basket of products across life to health to short-term insurance, which we can then deploy. So these early days were one around learning, and we built the platform around the needs of the customers. So we didn't take a big kind of platform off the shelf and then say that has to work for everything.
Yeah.
We built a platform based on what we knew we needed, and probably more important, what we knew we didn't need,
Yeah.
because that obviously only becomes cumbersome and painful.
Which is why I'm such a big strategy fan. People, when you talk about strategy, people go, "Ah, strategy again." I said, even to our team, I said the strategy is not as much about the value that you're going to create. It's also very much about the things you don't touch while you're on that value creation journey and defining what the value is.
100%. And that comes back to your question about scale.
Yeah,
So when we first set up, it was absolutely on the basis to be able to be scalable and essentially global. And so while we initially focused at Cape built in kind of Cape Town,
right,
our intention was always be a kind of global kind of player. And I think what we found around what we're doing across the rest of Africa is we can then bring those lessons to kind of other markets. Whilst our initial play was across Africa, I think eight countries north of South Africa, we're now actually doing more and more in South Africa. So we've just won the account of a big bank in South Africa. We've got a couple other initiatives going forward, so that'll hopefully come out soon. And we're actually finding that all those lessons around across different products,
right.
across dealing regulators across other markets, is now coming to bear in terms of the kind of platform in South Africa. And if you go back to Clayton Christensen's kind of innovations dilemma and kind of innovation solutions, you also say that kind of point around a product that maybe is cheaper than other products, but maybe not as good as other products, but addresses your primary needs at a better price point. That's essentially what we've been doing across the continent. So equally, you can then deploy that in developed countries like the UK and others, where we expect to move to at some point.
Now, Africa is not a country. I think some Americans are still finding out about this, but
Indeed.
and once again, I mentioned nuance earlier. There are cultural nuances. There's so many of these things you need to take into account because funeral cover could be okay here, right? South Africa, everybody's like, yeah, man, I'm gonna die one day. I better get the funeral cover. And the way funerals, or if you like, celebrated, or the way people mourn, it's a big thing in,
100%.
in South Africa in particular. But that does not mean it's the same across the country. Have you picked up like glitches and so you've got this one product on funeral cover, but you want to take it to another market, and people are going, "Hey, what are you doing here? This doesn't
100%.
this doesn't sit very nicely with us and our culture."
100%. This is still my consulting days, but it's been a lesson I've applied to today.
Right.
So when I was still in consulting, we found that Vodacom and Tigo were doing phenomenally in funeral insurance in South Africa and Ghana.
Right.
And so they thought, this is a great idea. So let's basically deploy that into East Africa.
Mm.
I think it's Tanzania at the time. Because funeral insurance is actively sought after here. I don't know if you've ever looked at just Googled funerals in Ghana, or coffins in Ghana. You have these most elaborate coffins. I still remember this picture of a coffin as a cigarette. It's or a cigarette pack. It's deeply concerning, but clearly that's what they want to be buried in. Not that yeah, very strange. But if you go to East Africa, and clients are ringing them up and saying, "Why are you cursing us? Why are you wanting us dead?" Because again, that talking about funeral and such like is not culturally acceptable. So again, you now need to recognize that and adapt your strategy accordingly. So often in East Africa, they now call funeral insurance last expense. Because again, that talking about funerals and death is not something you want to talk about. So in all those markets, we
Yeah.
have to adapt to the nuance. So it's not a case you can have one product here
Right.
and then kind of roll out these widgets wherever you are. You actually, with insurance, you do need to adapt that to not only to the local cultural drivers, but
Yeah.
also the partners that you're engaging with, whether banks, whether it's telcos, whether it's kind of fintechs and such like.
South Africa is also perceived in a certain manner across the continent, not always favorably. Some people go, "Here come the South Africans again to try and tell us what to do with our lives." Right. How important is diversity within your own organization? And that diversity would obviously include local knowledge, and you sit around a strategy table or you do your visits, and someone says, "Well, did you see that? This is what it actually means, and therefore we can't do this." Let's talk a bit about diversity within the business in order to allow you to innovate effectively for these mass markets.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, I mean, the different aspects of that is obviously the research we talked about earlier. But if you
Yeah.
look at the team, we are now based in 6 countries, fully remote, but from 9 nationalities. 7 of those are African nationalities. So, again, we're very intentional about ensuring kind of diversity in the team. And if you just go to our website, you'll just see how
Yeah.
incredibly diverse the team is across all the different ways of measuring kind of diversity. And that is incredibly important because that helps us pull out those deep local insights as well as applying the kind of the research that we're doing in the
Right.
underlying markets to be able to adapt products effectively. So 100%, and it's been very intentional since the very beginning, from our initial values that we drafted to how we apply it as an organization.
We won't tell the Americans about the diversity. Don't worry about it. We don't want you to lose any funding. Uh, he says facetiously.
Yeah, you got to be careful these days.
No, no, you have to. You absolutely have to. But I want you to get onto the story side of it, right? We love story on Innovate Africa. And I think you sort of touched on the type of solutions and the innovation, but take us through a basic innovation process and a day in the life of Inclusivity Solutions.
Good question. So, I mean, there's obviously different approaches to kind of
Yeah.
innovation, but certainly in certain kind of cases where we're coming up with a new kind of concept or ideas, we typically follow that human-centered design kind of research, which where you're going through kind of interviews, we're doing kind of co-working workshops where you're basically bringing those kind of end customers that you want to engage with into a room and working with them to design a product that make kind of sense.
Yeah.
And so we can co-design those products with the end kind of customer, which we then go and test in the market as well in terms of different models around how do you communicate, how do you get people to engage with the kind of the product itself, right through that process. So we spend quite a bit of time really kind of first understanding, kind of hearing what's needed, co-designing the products of the end customer, and then testing in the market. We do a lot of kind of A/B testing in terms of communication, what messages make sense based on behavioral economics, and what's the best kind of customer journey, and even like kind of payment testing. So, for example, in Rwanda, I think one of the most interesting examples, we launched a pay what you can model.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
literally, you could pay what you can. And we had one client in particular who was clearly testing this product because it's not a product that was well known in Rwanda at all at the time. We saw them pay a little bit in the morning, a little bit mid morning, another payment kind of like lunchtime,
Right.
and then the balance of the monthly premium at the end of the day. So what are they doing? They're clearly testing it, testing whether the product works with a small amounts of money in order to say to build that trust in the underlying kind of
Oh,
product.
that's important.
And that's important. And we've seen that across other products. You've seen that in savings. People save a bit and see whether it's a trustworthy institution. Credit, take a small amount, see it works, and then you
Yeah.
do. And it's the same with insurance. People want to test it to see whether it makes sense, see if it's trustworthy. And if it's trustworthy, then you're more likely to use it. So we're not just basically innovating, we're also helping create a market in much of these countries, which also come to the challenge of what we're trying to do in Africa, because we're not just basically deploying products in an established market, you're actually creating trust and helping create a market where penetration is so low.
Jeremy, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's almost time for us to wrap. And I'm talking about wrapping the show. Not actually rapping, because I think we'd both be pretty bad at it, right? Uh, but why is it that some people don't get the need for inclusivity? And I asked that question, and then I ask a follow-up question, and this question is: do you only work with people who get inclusivity, or do you work with people who just want to make a quick buck because they see a poor market out there that could represent better bottom line?
Good question. Well, I think the reality of insurance is a scale game. It's all around the law of large numbers. So if you're just serving a couple of people, you can do high premium and it's probably okay. But it is about the law of large numbers.
Yeah.
So we work for partners who can manage that kind of scale. And so often we have those kind of alignment in terms of what we're doing with our kind of partners because they see they need to have it's a law of large numbers and it has to be sustainable to make sense. And you have to pay claims because that's the kind of the shop window. So I think there are always cases where there are some who are basically just purely kind of bottom line, not interested
Yeah.
in kind of client value and such like, and we'll see how that's kind of managed in that. But I think the majority of people we've engaged with do have a passion for what they're doing and watch about what we're doing and by the point now we need to be kind of scalable. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the model, it is about scale. The majority at the bottom of the pyramid is not just the bottom, it's the majority of the period north of the borders. So we're looking for products that can address that low mass market as well as that middle income segment. So that's where we become a full kind of multi-segment player that can also address some quite high up the pyramid as well. But yes, there's always interesting tensions, particularly when we are an enterprise kind of based kind of SaaS provider now.
Indeed. And a quick one, if you can do this in under a minute. One or two of the biggest challenges you've faced building this particular business?
The critical one is payments. And the irony is, at Finmark Trust, I was responsible for overseeing kind of payments.
Right.
The biggest challenge in Africa is the lack of payments, the lack of recurring payments, the ability to collect payments frictionlessly. So I think only 26% of mobile money providers enable auto debit, recurring payments, or debit orders. Without recurring payments, you can't do kind of voluntary insurance through mobile money providers. That's overwhelmingly the biggest challenge we've seen in Africa, is around kind of the payment side. Once frictionless payments is addressed, whether it's automatic or embedded or bundled into product and
Yeah.
service, then you can leverage the different distribution models and deploy a whole range of products. That's probably, for me, is still the biggest challenge on the rest of Africa, is recurring payments, which is obviously where South Africa is actually way ahead. There are a lot more challenges we could talk about in more than a minute.
Absolutely. Well, we'll do another show. This is me. I love doing the show because a lot of people talk about challenges. And a long time ago, when I was still in radio, we made a decision to rather speak to the people who fix those, which is really the impetus for this show
Nice.
on Business Day TV, TimesLIVE, and a lot of the other platforms that we hosted on. Jeremy Leach, what a pleasure having you here. And I just need to say, well done, man, on all the good work you and your team is doing, along with your partners, including, well, MFS is now OnAfrique, Dare, and the guys there. So you're working with really good people, delivering impact that is totally phenomenal. And that is what Innovate Africa is all about. Jeremy Leach, the founder and executive director of Inclusivity Solutions. And I'll see you on Innovate Africa next week.